Welcome to Organized Chaos, the podcast dedicated to helping seven-figure companies grow to nine-figure ones by turning HR into rocket fuel for their growth. I'm your host, Nahat Kairala, and I've been helping companies do just that for more than a decade. In each episode, I'll dive into HR topics that have a significant impact on your company's growth and leave you with actionable advice that will help your business reach its full potential. Let's dive right in and start organizing all that HR chaos. Hello and welcome to episode 8. Today I'm tackling a question that I get frequently from founders. Should we outsource HR or keep it in-house? Before I help you navigate this question, it is important for us to level set on what HR should be doing in a 7 to 8 figure company. In no specific order, your early stage startup should prioritize the following 4 things to set you up for scalable growth. 1. Compliance, payroll, and benefits. 2. HR strategy and company culture. 3. Talent acquisition. And 4. HR infrastructure. Now, there is a set of capabilities that every startup needs in order to do these things well, regardless of whether you outsource or do things in-house. If you're interested in learning more about these capabilities, then check out episode number 3. So back to the question of outsourced versus in-house HR. It's not about whether HR should be outsourced or not, but rather which high-value HR activities are worth your time and which low-value HR activities are not. Every company is unique in how it prioritizes these 4 HR areas I listed earlier. For example, one company might emphasize hiring and retention, while another is focusing on building scalable HR infrastructure. That doesn't mean that one has to happen at the expense of the other, but prioritizing your HR initiatives is a prerequisite for having the outsourced versus in-house conversation. So outsourcing HR is not an all-or-nothing proposition. It is a well-calculated strategic decision that allows you to offload low-value HR work to allow you to focus on high-value HR work. High-value versus low-value is going to differ from one company to another. So to help you answer the question about outsourced or in-house HR, I'm going to address this for each HR area I listed at the start of the episode. Let's start with compliance, payroll, and benefits. You might be wondering why I'm combining these 3. That is because they are deeply interconnected. Compliance ensures that your startup adheres to labor laws and regulations, which is crucial to prevent legal issues down the line. Payroll and benefits administration are not just about cutting checks. They're about compensating your team fairly and offering benefits that can attract and retain top talent, all within the legal boundaries of the locations which you are hiring talent from. So companies either keep all these in-house or outsource all 3 together. In fact, HR outsourcing providers rarely accept to work with a company without managing all 3 due to the interconnected nature of these functions. Compliance, payroll, and benefits are what most founders think of when they think of HR outsourcing. A 2022 survey by the National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, NAPEO, found that 15 to 17% of all employers with 10 to 99 employees work with a professional employer organization or PEO, and 40% of companies in business for less than 10 years reported using a PEO. For those of you who don't know, a PEO is a third-party HR outsourcing provider that is legally registered with the local government to manage your company's compliance, payroll, and benefits. What they essentially do is register your employees under their tax ID and administer your employees' payroll and benefits on your behalf. This allows them to bear most of the compliance risk in return for a monthly fee per employee. Your employees work for you under what is called a co-employment model. That means you are the actual employer that the employee works for, but legally, the PEO is the employer of record with the government. As the statistics show, PEOs are quite popular among young and growing companies because they help alleviate the administrative burden that comes with these activities. Also, it is significantly cheaper to work with a PEO than it is to hire a dedicated employee to manage these HR activities, especially if your company employs less than 50 employees. Where startups find the best returns on investment from PEOs is in benefits. If you're a US based company, then you know how outrageously expensive benefits are, and the cost is highly influenced by your company size, among other factors. A PEO is able to get your small company very competitive rates for benefits because they have thousands of employees under their legal entities, which allows them to secure large discounts from insurance carriers, discounts that you wouldn't dream of getting if you went to the market directly. So, if you're a company that employs less than 50 employees, then outsourcing compliance, payroll, and benefits to a PEO might be a good idea. But outsourcing to a PEO becomes problematic when you get closer to the 100 employee mark. The main reason for this is that PEOs don't scale very well with their clients. Their services and prices remain fairly static, and you can expect the typical annual increases. On top of that, you'll be able to get very similar prices for benefits by going directly to market once your headcount gets closer to 100. Another consideration you need to make when outsourcing to a PEO is that it is an absolute pain to offboard them. If you're a US company that employs people in a handful of states, then the offboarding is quite simple. But if you're growing quickly and have people all over the country and even internationally, then you're in for a treat. Offboarding a PEO means that you now need to register your company as an employer in every US state where you have employees, move them over to your entity, and then go find benefits which will likely look a bit different than what you already offer. I've been through this a few times before, and it is an administrative pain. Finally, PEOs generally mandate that you use their HR system to manage your employee records. Some modern PEOs integrate with third party HR systems, but most do not. And even if they do, it's very limited. So you need to factor in the cost of HR tech when you're evaluating a potential outsourcing move. My rule of thumb is if you're growing quickly and you're going to blow past 100 employees within a year or two, then don't bother outsourcing payroll and benefits. You're better off hiring an HR employee to handle these tasks and just go directly to market for benefits. One last point about compliance. I think startups should always work with an external labor law attorney who they can ask questions and seek guidance from when needed. Even labor law attorneys have to sometimes do a bit of research before they can give you an answer on something. So trying to do this in-house is not worth your time. And quite frankly, it's a risk not worth the money you'll save. No HR professional, no matter how experienced, is an expert in all facets of labor law. So take my advice and find outside counsel who can assist you with HR matters as they arise. Now let's move on to HR strategy and company culture. If you're a company with less than 50 employees, it's very likely that your HR strategy is squarely focused on supporting the immediate tactical needs of the business. This includes setting up as an employer in new locations, hiring people, and running payroll. That's quite understandable when you're just getting started, but HR strategy starts to increase in importance as your company grows. HR strategy is involved in determining what HR needs to do in order to enable your company to achieve its business goals. A well thought out HR strategy aligns your people operations with your business goals, and that includes defining and nurturing the right company culture. Other areas like organization design and employee experience also fall under HR strategy. According to research by the Society for Human Resource Management, companies that align HR strategy with business strategy are 17% more likely to report improved business performance. So, addressing HR strategy should be high on your list of priorities as you start growing. Outsourcing strategic HR work generally happens in one of two ways. You hire a project based consultant or firm to help you create the strategy, or you hire a fractional HR professional, someone who has been the head of HR at other companies, to build out the strategy and see through the implementation. The fractional route is typically a more long term engagement, and the person you hire usually becomes your acting head of HR or chief people officer. So they would own HR strategy work and maybe manage your day to day HR operations. The decision to outsource strategic HR work usually comes down to cost and velocity of growth. Hiring a rockstar HR leader on a full time basis is expensive, and most early stage companies would rather invest that money in other areas of the business. My rule of thumb is to never outsource this part of HR if your company has grown past 50 employees and growth is not slowing down. The pace of growth and increasing scale of your company will require full time attention from a skilled HR leader, and maybe if you support staff. But if your company isn't experiencing this breakneck pace of growth and you're still below the 50 employee mark, then it makes sense to outsource. In this case, I favor the fractional HR model to project based consulting for fast growing companies. I say this because companies that are growing quickly undergo a lot of changes in a short period of time. So the project based work you paid for can become obsolete fairly quickly. Sometimes changes might happen during an HR consulting engagement, but requesting changes based on your new business realities would be considered an out of scope request. In other words, you'll need to pay more money to make changes to the now obsolete scope of work you agreed to a couple of months ago. So it makes more strategic and financial sense to go with a fractional HR leader if you decide to outsource. Okay, now let's address talent acquisition. For a growing company, talent acquisition is arguably the most important HR function. You need to make sure that your company is hiring the right people and doing so within timeframes that meet your business needs. Young companies tend to rely heavily on their founders and employees' networks, alma maters, and job boards. Their employer brand is usually underdeveloped, and candidates don't know much about them beyond what's on the website. So, should you outsource talent acquisition? Yes and no. Let me explain. The only part of talent acquisition that you should ever consider outsourcing is the candidate sourcing stage. So, if you're working with third party recruiters or freelancers, only rely on them to find you candidates that fit your company's criteria, but never outsource the candidate assessment and evaluation process. In other words, don't fast track candidates through your recruiting process just because the recruiter interviewed them and ran reference checks. You and your team are the only people who can objectively evaluate if a candidate is a good fit for the job. Put candidates from third party recruiters through the same process you would put any other candidate. So, in short, let external recruiters find you the candidates, but you manage the entire process from there on out. Getting help with candidate sourcing is a good idea if you operate in a niche industry or you're filling a niche role. Specialized recruiters have massive networks that they can tap into, and their fees will be offset by the value you gain from hiring talent sooner rather than later. Overall, hiring third party recruiters on a contingent basis is an easy yet costly way to find qualified talent quickly. It's up to you to decide if the recruitment fees you're paying are worth it. Finally, let's talk about HR infrastructure. HR infrastructure includes all your HR processes and the technology that supports them. This is another area in HR that startups can leverage third party support for. The decision to outsource process design and technology sourcing and implementation generally comes down to your company's expertise and available capacity to do the work. If you don't have anyone at your company who is experienced in HR process design and HR tech implementation, then your best bet is to outsource this and get qualified help. Because making the wrong decisions can cost you tens of thousands of dollars to change down the line. The most important thing in building out your HR infrastructure is to ensure it is scalable. Before making any decision, think long term and take your growth into consideration. Beware of third party consultants and vendors who are pushy about getting you to buy specific software tools. Many HR tech consultants have referral deals with HR software vendors, so it is in their best interest to sell you that specific software because of the referral fees they'll get. Make sure that you work with consultants who are tech agnostic unless you've already made a decision on your desired tech stack and are just hiring someone who is knowledgeable in the implementation of those tools. In closing, the decision to outsource HR or bring it in-house is not a black or white decision. Think of it as an a la carte menu where you can pick and choose the HR work to keep in-house and which to offload to third-party vendors. Just keep in mind that there are pros and cons to each decision, and these will be different for each company based on its unique circumstances. That's all for this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about the types of leaders your fast-growing company needs to succeed. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review wherever you get your podcasts. This will help me spread the word about organized chaos and keep the show going. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to suggest for the show, please send me an email to hello@organizedchaos.fyi. For more content and resources, make sure to check out the website at organizedchaos.fyi. See you on the next one.